All right, welcome to our last episode on time management. We've looked at the need and principle of time management in episode 1 and the time of time management in episode 2. And now in episode 3, we'll look at some tools of time management. Now there's lots of tools that you can use for time management, but in this episode, I'm going to concentrate on 2 very basic and yet foundational tools when they are used well. And the first, diving right in, is a weekly schedule. Again, I can't stress this enough. It's so simple and yet so important. The aim with a weekly schedule is that you want to have an idea of what your week looks like. So not just one day, but an entire week. To have an idea and to have the specifics of what the week is shaped like and what it contains. Primarily then aiming at clarity about what's going on and what's required. So how do you do that? 4 very simple steps. Draw up a page with your week at a glance, fill in your lectures and tutorial times, place in your study slots using the work formula from episode 2, and tailor it as you need to. Let me go through each one of those 4 things very briefly. Step 1, have a page that has your week at a glance. Here's an example. It might need a bit of work, but there's the basic idea. You can see everything laid out there, Monday to Friday, Saturdays and Sundays, and some other sections which I'll come to soon. Step 2, fill in your lectures. This is, I think it's a 3rd year LLB student, and this is their lecture timetable filled in. All their subjects, succession, contract, a couple of other international law, etc. Step 3, now use your work formula to put in the bare minimum number of study slots. So for instance, you can see on Monday that there is a double of contract lectures at 10:30 and 11:25 a.m. on Monday. And so using the minimum work formula of matching 1 lecture to 1 study session from episode 2, we also have, you can see there on Monday, a double of contract studying on Monday morning before the lecture. And that's a pattern that's followed through on this schedule here. 1 lecture, 1 study session. It's slotted in somewhere during the week. Step 4 then is tailoring it, moving things around, putting in things that you think are important. You're tailoring it to your needs or your circumstances. So I've put in there some kind of routine to do with when to wake up, when to have breakfast, when to catch the res bus, lunch times, watching a TV series on Tuesday night, attending a sermon on campus on Wednesdays. This is all pre-COVID, of course, etc., etc. And if you can't quite see that, actually, let me just zoom in closer for you for a section there. And that gives you the basic idea. And you need to, again, adapt it as meets your need and your circumstances. Now, something important to say here is it's good to aim for a work week. An average work week is 40 hours. So that's 8 hours a day for 5 days. This example comes in at 41 hours. And it also has weekends off, which is a luxury. But the point I want to make here is aim for a work week. For those of you at university, there is tremendous benefit to thinking of your time at university as a job. You're largely pulling an 8 to 5 Monday to Friday. And thinking like that will actually better equip you for when university ends and you're out in the working world. Because at that point, you're just transferring one 8 to 5 schedule for another 8 to 5 schedule, using similar patterns and discipline in some ways, within reason, of course. Now, if a law student did this work schedule, I think that would be pretty good. In our experience, not many students are doing this kind of consistent studying and reading for their subjects. And the results would show, because now when exams come, you're in the driver's seat. Because when lectures end, then you still stick to this timetable and you simply replace the lecture slots with study slots and you keep it going. And perhaps because you've done a lot of summaries consistently throughout the year, you're building on past work and you are retaining information better. Seriously, you could even do 2 or 3 hours less than what's on the schedule, and I think you would be doing pretty well for yourself, and much better, if I'm honest, than many students at university. Now, I've also put a couple of other sections on the timesheet worth pointing out. One at the top is major study for this week. Here you may want to put down readings that are due, or assignments, or anything really that is due for that week. Or you might want to complete, all things that you might want to complete for that week. Remember, working ahead is wise, and we'll get to that shortly. Secondly, you can see I've also put right next to the Saturday and the Sunday that is blank, I put a goals for this week. Again, let me zoom in on that a little bit more. You can see it on the far right. That's attempting to keep an eye on the 7 major life categories that we spoke about in an earlier episode. You won't have something here for every category every week, but still, you're trying to keep it rolling over. So, for instance, what kind of things do you want to put here? Well, maybe under Friday, you want to put that you need to call your Buti because it's his birthday, or you want to drop your mom a message saying that you're thinking of her, or maybe you want to meet up with a friend this week, maybe Friday night. Actually, you put that in, actually, not only under the goals, but you put it into your schedule, you write it in. Or maybe it's health. You want to make sure you go for 3 runs this week or 3 gym sessions, and now you need to factor those in, and we'll return to how to do that shortly. Number 3 is also a very useful box when it comes to planning, called next week. So, and you can see it right next to the goals one. So what is that for? Well, let's say this week you bump into your supervisor and he says, hey, can we meet up next week, Tuesday, whatever time he gives? Well, you write it in. And that way, when you come to plan for next week, you can look at that box and you can say, okay, actually, I need to factor this in for this coming week. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, remember our time management principle from episode 1 here. Patterns and systems improve efficiency, drawing less energy to get more done. And here, the pattern and system is to have a relatively set week, if you can, with some flexibility, which means you know what you have on and what's expected of you. And you can see your entire week at a glance. What that does is it cuts down on needing to make many of the daily decisions because you already know what you'll be doing. I mean, the last thing you want to do is to wake up every morning and go, oh gosh, I still got to plan what I'm doing today. What was I doing this afternoon? Oh, there was something. Can't remember what it was. That's not what you want. Instead, you want to be able to just wake up and go, well, you look at this and you go, okay, that's what's on for today. It sounds so simple, and it is, but gosh, having this down will save you so much energy. And from there, any changes that pop up are just little movements. It's not you having to replan everything and reinvent the wheel each time. Instead, your major work and responsibilities and relationships and goals for the week are right in front of you. My suggestion here is that you do this weekly schedule before the week begins. So for me, on Fridays at 11:15 a.m., I spend 45 minutes doing my schedule for the next week. And perhaps you want to do yours on Friday or on Saturday or on Sunday, even just 30 minutes, getting a better grip on what your week is going to look like the week that's coming. Okay, so the weekly schedule. Now, before we get to looking at our last tool, I want to make 5 points about this tool, about your weekly schedule. And here's the first one, decisions regarding your weekly schedule. So for example, you really feel like it would be better to do a gym session on Monday nights. or a friend says to you, it's my 21st on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Can you come? What do? It's not in the schedule. The schedule I put as an example, it prioritizes work. In other words, your studies, pulling a 41-hour work week. But there are other things that perhaps need to fit in. So those gym sessions will run, maybe that's part of your health goal. You know, I often meet up with men from campus and read the Bible with them and pray with them and share life. And some of those guys, we meet up once a week on a specific day and at a specific time. And maybe that is part of their faith goal. So how do you fit those things in, whatever it is? Well, you might have noticed that while the weekly schedule is full, and it is, it's not full to the brim. For instance, Monday and Friday afternoons, 5:30 to 7 p.m. are free. And incredibly, weekends are also free. So what do we do here? Well, there's got to be some flexibility. But the principle is replacement. In other words, if something on your weekly schedule must move, it doesn't always, but if it does have to move, then it must be placed somewhere else. And this is particularly important when it comes to the study slots that you have. So maybe on Monday nights, you want that gym session. Well, Monday afternoon has some flexibility. Either you do your gym then, or you do your gym Monday night and you move the readings to Monday afternoon, or to either Saturday or Sunday. Or let's say one of my guys wants to meet with me Monday afternoon. It's important to him. So he puts it in and he moves that succession study. I've forgotten where the schedule's gone. He moves that succession study to another place. Or maybe something less planned and less frequent, like a 21st. Again, maybe you move things around so that you can go. You're keeping work as a priority, but then you're factoring in other parts of life. And you're moving things around so that you can try and hit some of those goals to do with those 7 life categories, if possible. I suppose at this point, it's also worth saying that as students, the time that you are at university needing to study or to write exams is reasonably little in terms of weeks of the year. This kind of schedule will be at most for 40 weeks of the year. And it means that for the other 12 weeks, or probably more at times, you're cruising. So get a good schedule for in-term time, work well during term, and then you can do other stuff when term or semester is on break. And so that's the first point related to the weekly schedule, decisions that you might need to make. Secondly, dangers to your weekly schedule, time wasters. So think, what do you think are time wasters to your schedule? I think for many people, it's things like social media or your cell phone in general. Our phones are not great when it comes to learning. Never have it in front of you when you are studying. Someone told me that we lose 30% of our concentration, almost 1/3. You know, if that is true, goodness, that is a lot. And so we need discipline with these things. I'm not in the same current life, I don't know, area or category as many of you. But for me, I need to do work in the morning that requires sustained concentration. I don't need the distractions. I need to just be thinking for an hour or two on one thing. And so I try, it's not always possible, but I try and make sure that my computer and cell phone don't distract me. So at various times, I've used a whole bunch of different apps to block my access to email or to Facebook, or to limit WhatsApp notifications coming through, or people being able to call me, or whatever the case may be. Use whatever it is that works for you, whatever it is that helps you with distractions that are real for you. It's about trying to manage distractions and time wasters as much as you can. Now, we're not saying cut those things out entirely. You're on the taxi maybe in the morning, send those messages then. Read surf online then. Or you have a break at 9:35 on a Monday or a Tuesday. Check your messages then. Or you can grab 5 minutes walking between classes or between Zoom lectures. When you need to work, work, and cut those other things out. Technology is a tool. You use a tool. You are not ruled by a tool. But unfortunately, we have become more and more ruled by technology. This is just, it's everywhere for us. You know, even do yourself a favor and see if you can go 3 hours without checking your phone, whatever it might be for you. We've picked up all kinds of bad habits, and they distract us, and they don't help us to concentrate when we need to. And we've got to break some of those habits, and we've got to retrain ourselves. In actual fact, Nicholas Carr, in his book, The Shallows, reminds us that technology is changing the way that actually our brains function and retain information. We struggle more and more to retain information because of how technology is changing us. And so we need to retrain our brains, rewire them for concentration to be more normal for us. Thirdly, the danger of a weekly schedule, false control. I always have a fear when I'm teaching time management. And my fear is that you fall into the trap of thinking that you are the God of your time, that you're some kind of absolute self-ruler. You're not. We're not. And I'll show you. Imagine we carefully plan our week down to the last minute and detail. But then what happens? You have 45 minutes set aside for catching the res bus, but you end up waiting over an hour just for it to arrive. Or your Friday afternoon looks free for studying, but then your dad phones and says that your uncle has died and you need to come home. We're not absolute rulers of our time or of ourselves, and we shouldn't want to be. Imagine a world where everyone considered themselves the little kings or queens of their own lives, controlling things just for themselves and for their own little kingdoms. Imagine that. Actually, it's not that hard to imagine. It's life as we know it, isn't it? But what does that result in? Everyone out for their own little selves. King or queen of my little kingdom. And so I got to make sure that my kingdom is doing okay. And so I go, get away, that's mine. Stay away. And we're holding on to things. See, even with time management, it would be a mistake to use it to put more of your trust or your identity in how well you can manage your time. Manage your time wisely. There's a goodness to that. But remember, realize that you are not in complete control. And those emergencies and events are often a very good reminder of that. And so my point is to warn you against thinking that you are in complete control of your time or your life. You're not. Let's work on a weekly schedule, but we are not in absolute control. If you think you are, then when things pop up, they will ruin you in some way or another. Fourthly, and related, a danger of weekly schedule using people and forcing out relationships. It would be terrible if we managed our time so well that we forced relationships out. And this can happen in multiple ways. For example, self-rulers use their time to make sure they get what they want. And if you use your timetable as just another way of securing what you think will satisfy you, then the great danger is that you will use people and not love people. You'll use people to get ahead or to get something done. You'll use people and not love people. But friends, we were not created to treat people like that. And actually, none of us want to be treated like that. This danger also comes in other ways. Maybe again, you want to use your weekly schedule to achieve your goals. And so you have hours and hours at your desk doing this or that. And maybe you achieve your goals. You get those incredible marks. But you look back and you find that it's lonely at the top. We were made for good relationships. And so don't use this schedule to force out relationships. In fact, my encouragement to you is factor them in and make time for loving and serving the people around you. And sometimes they are more important than sticking to your schedule. Lastly, rest during your weekly schedule. It's good for you. Let me talk briefly here about having a day off each week. We were not made to work 7 days a week. You might think that the person who works 7 days a week is being productive, but actually that's not always the case. In the short term, and especially the long term, working 7 days a week is unproductive. It's not good for us. We were made to work well and also to rest. This is good for us spiritually and physically and mentally and for our relationships. A field needs to lie fallow sometimes before it can produce better crops. You understand the picture? Or another example, and athletes know this, rest is just as important in terms of your training. It's a part of your training. The body needs time to recover. And so have a day, Saturday or Sunday, and set it aside as a non-work day. It's possible. I can tell you, it is possible even in stressful times like exams, and it will be good for you. Right, that's all linked to the weekly schedule. Let me end by talking far more briefly about the last major tool that I want you to get familiar with, and it is a calendar. So remember, the weekly schedule, we're thinking not a day, but a week. But with the calendar, we're expanding things out and we're looking even further ahead. And doing that so that we know how best to factor in now what is coming up then. None of this is rocket science, but it can be a game changer. So how do you do this? 3 steps. Number 1, get yourself a calendar. I think most of us are probably going to use an online one, maybe the one that comes with our Gmail account or something like that. A physical copy works as well. So now you've got one. What do? Well, step 2, you start by filling in the big dates. Term dates, starting, ending, download the semester dates from UKZN or the UniZulu website, your university, and then put those big dates in. And then put down assignments and tests and other important dates as they are given to you by your lecturers or your professors. And then step 3 is to, once you've written that down, is to plan things out. So for example, it's April now, but in September, I have 3 tests coming up, let's say. If I wait for the week before those tests, then I probably won't be able to do it. Or maybe, I will, but life will be pretty frantic and I'll have to throw everything else out the window just to be able to survive those tests. And that is just such a horrible way of doing life, don't you agree? And so instead, trying to plan for that, plan around that, looks like this. You're spreading things out so that actually when you get to those 3 tests, life pretty much carries on as normal. And this is how I like to picture it. A due date, like a test or an assignment, is kind of like a mountaintop. And if you're starting the week or day before, then you've got quite a bit to climb up to get there. What we're after, though, is we're after kind of flattening the gradient by stretching it back, so that actually we can take, if we're taking a step or 2 towards that each day or each week, it actually ends up flattening out what is needed for us. And it means that when that what would normally be a stress moment like that comes, actually we're not climbing a mountain. It's just a normal walk, or maybe it's just a little hill, but it's not that. So remember our time management principle from episode 1. Patterns and systems improve efficiency, drawing less energy to get more done. Here, the pattern and system is plugging major dates into your calendar. As soon as you get it, put them in. And the system involves taking those high energy points, you remember, so the test, the assignment, whatever it is that requires a massive amount of work beforehand or stress, and you're distributing them in the weeks before so that when it arrives, it isn't a mountain, but it's instead perhaps just a single step out of the ordinary. You're being diligent now so that there's little or no stress then. That's a plan. And you write it in. So maybe you write in your calendar that each week of May, I'm going to be spending 2 hours extra in prep for those tests in September. Whatever it is, you've got to work it out. So that even when that high stress moment or moments come, yes, it might require a little bit more from us, but we can do it without needing to especially throw the rest of life out of the window. Other responsibilities, other subjects, other relationships, all that kind of stuff. I suppose it's helpful to realize that assignments and tests are actually, when the lecturers set this up best, they're actually meant to be moments to force us to consolidate or to get to grips with certain concept or material. And as you work towards those and in those, doing them well will actually mean that you are preparing yourself for other exams or other major projects that are coming. And so in some way, I realize this is not the way we think, but in some ways, we want to welcome those as an opportunity to do that. We might need to change our mindset a little bit. Besides which, working in advance is actually a better way of learning. All right, there is more to say, but in a nutshell, that's the calendar tool. The weekly schedule, that helps you to get a grip of your week at a glance. The calendar helps you to expand things out and to see and to work towards what is coming. I'm going to leave it at that. I hope these episodes have been helpful in some way. Do feel free to leave a message below if you have a question, and we'll try and answer it. And of course, we'd love you to check out some of the other things that we do. God bless.